Good morning, everyone. Yes, happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there, the moms of children, of pets, the aunts that play a mothering role. There's all kinds of moms that are at work at all times. We honor you today. I know there have been people that have been volunteers texting in this morning going, I'm trying to get there, but the traffic is driving. How many got kind of caught in all that? Yeah. So anyways, everyone just breathe. You're going to see some people frantically coming in at different points. Just smile and you'll understand why they're rolling in a little bit later. The big Mother's Day race is rolling in the city, and Elbow Drive happens to be one of the big traffic points. So yeah, we deal with this every Mother's Day, and that's all right. Glad you're here. Look, I want to start off with a story this morning. It goes way back to the early days when Kathy and I were married. I think we had only been maybe married a year. I've told this story before, and probably of all the stories I've told of Kathy and I, none has caused Kathy and I to talk more about it on the front end before I actually do it. She's like, wait a second, this is not how I remember this story. And I'm going, oh, I remember this story very well. So we go back and forth. So in all honesty, she has her version, I have my version. And to be honest, I think both versions are probably pretty accurate. It's amazing how what you see in the middle of everything going down can be so different from what the other person is seeing. All right, enough of that. We were in our first year of marriage, and I have a lot of different friends, but one of them really stood out. Great guy. In fact, he was part of my wedding party. Just one of those all-around great guys. He just had so much outside of just being a great friend to me, the guy just had so much going on. He had a great career early on in his life already. Drove a nice car. He was a handsome guy. He was so respectful and considerate of others. And of all my friends, Kathy always enjoyed when we get together with this guy. I'm not going to mention his name because it just gets complicated. But anyways, we would get together, and both Kathy and I would enjoy our time spent so much with him. So there's this one night we're out, and we all went out for dinner, the three of us. Hung out. I think we then, so went out for dinner. Then we went out to this place. We're just hanging out over drinks, chatting, laughing. We had these great laughs. It was just one of those good nights. But there's one point in the night when I just happened to notice Kathy really laughing at my friend's joke. It's just one of those things. Like Kathy was like busting a gut, and I'm like, she really enjoyed that joke. She really seems to think this guy is funny. And it just kind of, I just started thinking in my head, I wonder if she thinks he's funnier than I am. It sounds so juvenile when I'm tell this story. It's like, oh, it's painful. And so anyways, I'm noticing. And so anyways, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, you know what? I can tell a funny story too. So over the next little while, I find myself subtly trying to make Kathy laugh as hard at my story. And then it kind of moved off of that, and I felt this little uneasy feeling in my stomach, just watching the way Kathy would smile at my friend as he talked. She was just like, I know Kathy's watching this right now, and she's going, I didn't even, it doesn't matter, Kath, doesn't matter. That's what I saw, okay? And her tone that she would talk to him with. And then I'd say something, and her tone would change. It's like, it just seemed not as nice. How do you explain this? I don't know. But everything that I'm watching is starting to make me more and more nervous. And I remember at one point just feeling insecure. I went to grab Kathy's hand, and Kathy kind of did one of these. I'm just like, oh my God, she doesn't want to hold my hand. And I just started getting really, insecure. Like, no, I know my friend. He's right there. I would trust him implicitly with Kathy. So it's not like I felt like he was trying to do something sneaky, nothing like that. I wouldn't have guessed that ever. But I'm watching Kathy and I'm like, so my mind starts making up these stories. In that moment, I'm thinking, I bet Kathy is maybe falling a bit for this guy. And just my heart is beating out of my chest. And I held it together. I was doing my best to just smile through this one. Let's just get this over. But man, when we got into my truck that night, I began to flip my lid emotionally. And the way I did that night was I just went silent. Kathy's talking to me. She's laughing. She goes, "Oh, isn't that funny?" And I'm not responding. All of a sudden, she's looking at me going, something just happened? Like between us walking out the door of that place to the time we got in your truck? And I'm looking at her like, you're going to pretend you don't know what's going on? And she's looking at me like, I'm thinking, you're gaslighting me. You're making me think I'm going crazy. I know, I'm on to this. She's like, can you spell out what's happening here? And then I began to say, I can tell. You really think this guy's special? She's like, what? I said, yeah, I can tell. And don't try to tell me you don't. I said, I could hear it in the tone. The way you were laughing at his joke, it sounded like so junior high when I'm going through it. I'm saying this. She's like, you are being so ridiculous right now, Jeff. I was so angry at her in this moment because I'm so dysregulated. I'm so convinced that our relationship is falling apart right in front of me. I'll be honest with you. I had not ever really felt this in a relationship before. But I felt like I was, so nothing she would say. And at one point I just said, we drove in silence. That night I could not settle down. I tried to sleep. I'm just like, oh my God, what do I? Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt a gripping insecurity? In a close relationship where you're wanting to be close to someone, or someone really mattered to them, and then they did something that indicated to you that somehow the relationship was under threat, and you're going, oh, I sense something. Maybe they said something, and then you're apart, and so then you're trying to call them, and they're not calling you back. Or you text them, and they're not responding. Rather than giving you what you're needing to go, oh, okay, we're all good, they're doing or saying other things, and it's leaving you kind of going, oh, we got a problem. And then your mind starts racing. I was talking to a woman just this week. She had this going on at work with her boss. It's just like, I can tell something's not right, and I'm not sure where this is going. And she's just trying to hold her stuff together. Maybe in your dysregulation in that moment, you start resorting to certain behaviors that are just not like you. That was the thing with me. I wouldn't have considered myself an overly jealous guy at all, or insecure for that matter. But in that moment, I was acting in ways, Kathy couldn't even recognize me. She's like, What is happening to you right now? And I'm throwing some accusations at her. Then I'm shutting down and pushing her away. She's trying to say, Jeff, I love, and I'm like, just complete emotional meltdown, flipping my lid. Experts seem to agree that one of the most misunderstood and underestimated enemies of relationships is insecure attachment. Insecure attachment creates a lot of relationship. That's the truth. Insecurity forms, they say, from the time we're young. Like literally when we're babies. Our interactions with our parents or our primary caregivers. And then it can subtly build over the years with every little betrayal, every relational setback. It kind of starts forming a real impression, shaping a certain pattern in us, how we attach to people in our lives. Different forms of insecurity show up. Now, you may not have experienced something like Kathy and I did, or like I did with Kathy, but it might shock you just how much of a role insecure attachment might be playing in your life right now in different ways. What might shock you is how different your relationships would look, perhaps, if where you're feeling insecure, it got treated to restore a level of safety and security. I never knew it at the time when that all went down with Kathy and I, that I was displaying symptoms of an anxious attachment style. If you would have told me that, I would have said, and a what? What's an attachment? What's an anxious? We've been talking about attachment lately. And if you haven't heard attachment theory or anything around that area, I just want to say this is one of the great revelations since about the 70s. Social scientists have been learning about human behavior and how we interact and why we interact the ways we do with others. Did you know that of all the mammals out there, we are a mammal, of all the mammals out in the world, every other mammal, when they're born, is more capable than the human baby. We come out and we are basically helpless. We are at the mercy of our primary caregivers. For that reason, our close attachment to those who are in our care or who care for us is vitally important. Instinctually, we learn come on in, folks. Sorry about the traffic out there. Come right in. What they have learned is that instinctually, when we are born, we will cry to make sure our primary caregivers are close. If they leave, it'll set off alarms, and we're supposed to cry, and then they come back. John Bowlby, social scientist in the 70s, he began studying this. He would put babies in a room with their moms or whoever was caring for them, and then he would watch as their primary caregivers would leave. What would happen to the baby? 3 different groups emerged, 3 patterns. One group of babies that Vince talked about last week, when the primary caregiver left, didn't cry at all. It was like they were oblivious. They almost didn't care if their primary caregiver left. Somehow, they had an internal ability, they learned somehow to just remain calm. They didn't freak out, which was a sign of trouble because they're like, hey, wait a second, that's not normal. You should be freaking out. Your primary caregiver is leaving. So that was one group. That was the avoidance. We talked about that last week. There was another group, though. When the primary caregiver left, they began crying, and then and crying just like they should. And then the primary caregiver would come in and make contact with them, and instantly, put the soother back in their mouth, hold them. I'm good. They called these the secure attachment. Come on in, folks. Apologize for the traffic. Come on in, just relax. We're all good. Okay, so and that's the secure. But there was this other group. Very interesting. Primary caregiver leaves. They start crying, freaking out. Primary caregiver returns, makes contact, touches them, and they keep crying. They won't settle down. They're shaking, whatever, and they're angry, they're upset, they're crying. This was interesting pattern too. This is what Bowlby described as the anxious attachers. Interesting. Those are the ones I want to talk to today. I, on the spectrum, would fall on the anxious more than the avoidant. According to Bowlby, this attachment style typically develops from the time we're young, when a primary caregiver has kind of been intermittent with their support. There's times when they're there, but then there's times when they go missing. And the baby will cry, and no one's coming. And will cry, and no one's coming. And then all of a sudden, the primary caregiver comes in, and that baby now has been worked up to a lather, and now is mad at that caregiver. So why did you do that to me? And then finally, they get them calmed down. But then there might be other times where all of a sudden they're missing again. What ends up happening, according to the theory, is that those with an anxious attachment style have learned to develop this fear, low-grade fear of abandonment. They're worried that if that person leaves and they start crying, they're not going to hear them, or they might not come back. What's very interesting is this attachment style that starts at a very young age actually begins to take shape over the years of our lives. It doesn't necessarily go away. And in fact, it begins to shape the way that we react to other people in our lives. Someone says, hey, let's do that this week. I'll call you. Oh, that'd be great. But they don't call. And what happens for the anxious? They said they were going to call. I wonder what happened. Did I upset them? All of a sudden, this fear of they might not call. They might not. Something might change, and they might not be coming back into my life again. Now, you might not even know that this is going on. I did not know that this was going on. But for the anxious attacher, something then begins to happen. They say about the anxious, you have such a hyper-vigilant threat system for people leaving, for people abandoning you. You watch eye contact. You watch body language, a rolling of the eyes. Oh, that says something. Tone of voice. Oh, they're upset. She's mad at me. Oh, he is really pissed off, I can tell. This hyper-vigilant threat system can let you know. Oh, phone's ringing? That's okay. Just... It's all good, Evan. So it's weird how this subconscious fear of abandonment ends up, as soon as you start seeing little signs of danger, it can fire up and get you doing all kinds of things. And then we fall into this kind of pattern of reactive, trying to fix what we think might be broken. We make up the story, now we're into, how can I solve this? And then the solving process, that's where things get really ugly. Because sometimes how we try to fix it as anxious does the opposite. Where the avoidant attachers, when they would feel a relational threat going on, when they sense something's off, they're like, okay, I think I'm out. She's getting upset. I'm going to my room. They'll just go away. And wherever they go, they can go and they can sit and relax, and they have this power of being able to do the things necessary to be able to soothe their system, lower the threat, and they feel good. The anxious don't work that way. In fact, the anxious, when they start getting under threat, they start moving toward. They're not walking away, they're moving toward. And if you know any real strong anxious people, you'll be sitting there and something might have gone on, they're feeling all dysregulated, and the conversation starts going and it starts getting louder and whatever, and one person might say, you know what, I'm done talking. But man, the anxious say, oh no, you're not. You're not going anywhere. We're fixing this thing. You're going, well, it's 1 a.m. We haven't fixed it in 3 hours. We're fixing this. For the anxious, it can go to those degrees where literally they don't know how to calm down, and they're looking for things, looking for signs, looking for words, looking for actions from that other person that can say, hey, we're good. You're good. We're good. And if that other person can do that right, often the anxious person regulates and comes down. Oftentimes for the anxious, if they're left alone, well, especially in that regulated state, a dysregulated state, it can really be trouble. They get under threat, man, I'm telling you. So it's important you understand as you're dysregulated as an anxious person, the things that you'll do, you don't even realize these are little strategies to try to reconnect with this person. Like keeping score. This is always a subtle thing that I did when I was, especially early in my relationship with Kathy. I must have been feeling little senses of threat, and so I would keep score. I begin counting. How many times have I initiated a date night compared to her? Uh-oh, we got trouble. How many times do I say, I love you, babe, first? Why isn't she doing it first? Uh-oh. It sounds junior high-ish, right? But I'm telling you, your mind starts playing, and you start going, just wait a second. Why do I always have to initiate sex? What? And as a young guy in a relationship, you begin kind of connecting these dots and going, I think I got trouble here. We got a problem, folks. Keeping score. Then the hostility can come up every now and then when you're feeling threatened. How quickly it can go from, what's the matter? What's the matter? And the story gets built, and all of a sudden, the loud tones that can come out, the accusations, sometimes you can find yourself saying things that you don't even mean, that are hurtful. And even as they're coming out of your mouth as an anxious, you can kind of be looking across going, oh no, I really hope this works. I hope it makes them say, hey, don't say that. Look, it's weird. It's so counterintuitive. You can be saying mean things to try to make them turn and come running back. But what does it do often? It says, makes them look at you and say, screw you. Now, especially to the avoidant. The avoidant doesn't like the emotional dysregulation often. That's like, oh, I don't like what's going on here. You're freaking me out. It's often the avoidant that will say, look take your little hissy fit here. Whatever it is you're thinking, all these stupid stories you're making up, you go back into your room, you settle down like I would, and come back to me and talk to me without crying, without screaming, without all of this. Get your act together and then come talk to me. That's exactly what an avoidant would do. But an anxious, it just doesn't work that way. They actually are needing this other person to help them. So in the middle of this all, what ends up happening is the very thing that the anxious is needing, the pulling apart, the pushing away. The anxious is saying, no, please come close. I'm worried you're going to abandon me. The avoidant is going, get your shit together and we'll talk. That's why they say anxious and avoidance have a tough time if they're not aware of this pattern. It can make it very difficult. The stories part, the way that our minds can cook up stories in a heartbeat, we can fill in the blanks. We might have only seen one little look, one little tone, and all of a sudden, or, it's 2:43 in the afternoon, I texted, he hasn't responded in 6 minutes. I know something's up. I know he's looking at that phone. I know he sees that I texted him. That jerk. All of a sudden, one conclusion to another conclusion to another conclusion. And then finally, by the time the phone call happens, or another phone message gets left. And boy, that one's not pretty. I know you. I know you're there. I know you can hear me. Whatever it might look like, all of a sudden, or the text. Now it's with an edge. Okay, fine, pal. You want to be that way? Okay. Meanwhile, the guy's in a meeting, has no idea, right? Comes out his phone, he's like, oh my God, there's 14 messages on my phone. They're all from her. And he just watches the escalation by each text, just ramping up. How many know what I'm talking about? This happens. It happens in little ways, big ways. It happens with those that are really close to us, our partners. Sometimes it can happen with a coworker, a best friend, a brother, a sister. It can happen with these people that matter to us. But for the anxious, when they feel like there is some kind of abandonment that's on the prowl, man, I'm telling you, it brings this out. Let's just talk about the external soothing piece. We need other people. Typically, the anxious need other people to help them soothe. Have you ever had someone come in and they are dysregulated? Maybe it was something in traffic. Maybe someone at home, they had a fight with their partner. They are wigging out. And you're just a coworker. And you're like, whoa, you okay? And you're like, whoa, you need to talk? And you say, sit down a second. Here, let's get you some coffee. What do you need? And you talk to them, and all of a sudden, you say a couple of things. You just go, oh, maybe you didn't mean that. Maybe, hey, my husband said that before. And really, actually, this is what he meant. Oh, really? I hadn't even thought about that. And all of a sudden, over the course of a short little conversation, that person went from freaking out, calm. They walk out of your office, and what do they say? Thank you. Oh, I'm feeling much better now. That is an external soothing, a relational soothing, as Vince referred to last week. This process of someone being able to get inside your story and rework it, perhaps. Or get you just breathing. Hey, breathe, man. Relax. You're okay. We're all right. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just, maybe you've been that person who's been dysregulated and you had someone come out of the blue. Maybe someone you didn't even know that well. And you just went blah, and they had a way of just being able to bring down the revs. And you walked away and went, thank you. Oh, man. This is the act of external or relational soothing. And I'm telling you, it's gold for the anxious attacher, for the person that needs some help sometimes when things start going sideways. I want to talk for a couple minutes about how you can do this for someone in your life, for the anxious attacher. I want to talk to those who are trying to love their anxious neighbor or partner or child, parent. And then I want to just take a few minutes and talk to all of you who fall into this category of anxious. Let's first talk to all those that are trying your best. Maybe you are married to someone who's anxious, you have a family member, whatever, and you're going, man, I want to help, but boy, this goes sideways so often. All right, let's just talk a little bit. One very effective way. Let me say this. Week 1, Vince talked about widening the window. The window of tolerance. Thank you. The window of tolerance. When your window of tolerance is this narrow and something happens, you have very little ability to react in a secure way. When your window is small, your insecurity is high. When you do certain things and you can widen that window of tolerance, your security gets so strong that things can happen. Someone can say something, someone can do something, someone can freak out, and because your window is so wide, it's like it doesn't even faze you. You, in fact, can look at them and try to be a support to them. You're not just reacting to what you've just seen. So the key is to widen the window for that person in your life who's anxious. In other words, you're going to build a level of security and stability in them where they don't feel that threat is right there. You make that threat go away. You can actually do this for someone. One real key way they talk about is these verbal affirmations that focus on a person's soft spots. Soft spots meaning their insecurities. Now, we all got insecurities. Maybe you could name yours like this. Say, man, I really feel insecure. Maybe it's about my body in some way. Maybe it's about my history, my marital status. Could be about my socioeconomic status. We have insecurities. I'm loaded with insecurities. As a partner, as a person who's trying to love a person who is anxious, your ability to see where those soft spots are in that person, where their insecurities are, and be able to affirm them in them. Thinking about a couple. We'll call them Simon and Peggy, shall we? Peggy has a lot of insecurity around her level of intelligence. There are many conversations where people are talking about things and she doesn't know what they're talking about. And so she tries to fudge her way through it, but it wreaks havoc with her. Her husband, Simon, is highly intellectual, and so he often engages in all these different conversations with different people, and she's always just like riding the coattails, trying to hang on. But she feels very insecure about it. Simon didn't really pick up on that at first. In fact, he was always acknowledging how beautiful Peggy was. He was always trying to make her feel so good. Look at how beautiful you are. And he said it just never really seemed to land. It was almost like she was saying, big deal, big deal. That's not the thing I'm worried about. But one day, Simon looked at her and said, Peggy, you are an intelligent woman. You are smart. She had just acknowledged something that she learned, some interesting fact, and Simon jumped on that and said, I love that you know the history behind that thing. Peggy was like, really? That is so amazing. He said, I am always so blown away by how much you know about so many little things. Really? At the time, he said he had no idea what an impact some little comments like this would make in her life. But he says, I just noticed this little change. And then he said, I just kept finding ways to bolster this, to show her she is intelligent. She is smart. But every time I did it, he said, this brought out this confidence in her that he just loved. And she was able to just relax more and more. She would walk into these conversations. Before, she was just like, oh no, what are they? On the flip side, interestingly, Simon, though he knew he was easy, he'd be considered an intellectual. That wasn't the big thing. She was always so amazed by his intellect. In fact, that's what she was always commenting about. But when they started learning about this stuff, it was interesting. You know what Simon's soft spot was? Simon struggled to believe that he was lovable, that he was worthwhile as a human being. These were the thoughts that were rolling around in his mind. These were the feelings he had. Deep down, he continually anticipated that Peggy would leave him. That was a story in the back of his mind. You want to talk about abandonment? He was just worried. This is only a matter of time before the shoe drops and she walks out. Peggy starts putting the pieces together and then began saying things like this. Simon, you are a great man. You are the one I was always hoping to find. What? She said, Simon, you're stuck with me. I'll never leave you. Simon said, those words resonated so deep inside of me. It was like, it was giving me the cup of cold water I was so thirsty for. It just calmed me. Let me ask you something. Does an anxious person that you have in your life, do they have a soft spot that you can see? We don't like talking about our soft spots or our vulnerabilities, but if you get close to someone, close enough, perhaps they'll share. That's a great conversation to have. What do you feel most threatened by? What are the worst thoughts you have going through your mind in terms of our relationship? What do you worry about? You get that information, that is pure gold. Because then you key on that. Let's move on. Another way that you can help someone who's anxious is understanding their fear of separation. When they're away from you in a relationship, whether it's short time, long, it's different for every person. But just being away and not feeling like they're accessible can create that sense of, I wonder if they will come back. And they could never even verbalize it necessarily, but they feel this. Didn't realize that my son has an anxious attachment style. Never was it so obvious. One day, I was in meetings all afternoon. I turned my phone on Do Not Disturb, put it face down on the table, and literally I was in meetings from like 1 until 4 in the middle of it. My son is trying to reach it. Kathy didn't have her phone on her. And so he's phoning from school. Phoning. Finally, I pick up my phone. And it was one of those. I'm like, oh my God. Did someone die? This is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking something bad has happened to my son. So I'm getting on the phone. I'm like, buddy, are you okay? What's going on? He's like, Dad, where were you? I said, I'm in a meeting. I'm always in a meeting. On this day, from this time to this time, this is... He's like, I couldn't get a hold of you. Why didn't you have your phone? I said, buddy, I'm sorry. It was on Do Not Disturb. He's like, I couldn't get a hold of Mom. Couldn't get a hold of you. I didn't know where you guys are going. I was like, buddy, is everything okay? No, everything's fine. I couldn't get a hold. I was like, holy crap, pal. There was this heightened sense of threat that came over him. I made a deal with him right on the spot. I said, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'll make sure, man. I'm going to set up my phone. You'll always be able to get through. Now, did he ever call me again? Not like that. But it was just him. He was going, oh, thank you. That would be nice, Dad. Don't do that. Like what if I did need to? It's like being able to communicate to someone, hey, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You need to reach me? I'm going to make sure I will get your call. Something as simple as that for someone with a heightened, anxious attachment style can mean the world. Sometimes just sending them a text, unsolicited, saying, I'm thinking about you. You're on my mind right now. So there's one way you can help the anxious, and that's the proactive way. That's what I'm talking about right now. Before it gets to the threatened state, you're reaching out to them. You're saying, hey, I'm right here. Hey, I see you. Hey, come here. Give me a hug. You can whisper in their ear, man, I'm so proud. I will never, ever do that to you. I'm here. You find little ways to bring yourself close to them and let them know you're not going to leave them alone. That's on the proactive style. That opens up the window of tolerance. And when you get good at this, it's like those freakouts rarely happen. Remember with my son talking about what would happen. I didn't even know, but I thought a responsible parent says, look, at the end of high school, here's how it goes down. You go to university, you can stay at home. You don't go to university or wherever, you're out on your own. He started wigging out. I'm just like, pal, that's the way it works. He's like, you would kick me out. You would kick me out. I'm just like, I think you're going to want out. I think you're going to want to leave. That's how I was. I booted after grade 11 and went in room and board with the family. I'm just like, why are you freaking out about this? The anxious have this sense of you're just wanting to get away from me. I did not pick up on any of this. Finding any which way to say you always have, it's funny when I would say, you always will have a room here, you ever need it. No, he's never needed it. But just knowing made a big difference there. Okay, one last thing I'll say to help the anxious, and that is, if you wait too long and they get triggered, the wig out, the flipping of the lid, it can get messy. They'll say things they don't mean. They will act like they don't want you in their life. Get away from me. They'll say, oh, fine. They'll go on, do not disturb. They won't answer your texts. It's protest behavior. And for the avoidant, it can be very confusing. Because you go, oh, fine. You need your space? I'll give you your space. But the anxious aren't meaning that. They're actually, it's the most weird thing. They say, get away from me, but don't get away from me. That's what they really are saying. What the experts recommend is that when they're having that wig out moaning and they're accusing you, saying, you meant to, you did this, you're a whatever, they say one of the most effective ways to reach out and regulate an anxious person is to move toward them. They're going, get away from me. And you say, no, I'm not getting away from you. Come here. Come. No. And they're going, come. Just like my screaming kid, I just need to. And he's screaming, but I know down deep he's going, please don't let go of me. In my truck that night, I'm looking at Kathy going, I can't believe you do that. And she's going, Jeff, I don't. And I want her to keep fighting. I want her to keep engaged, saying, Jeff, but I love you, but I want her to keep going, even though I'm pushing her. It's the most confusing thing. And the more she did, the more over the next few days, she just kept reaching out. Maybe you got someone in your life who's been difficult and anxious. And you've just said, I don't need, not my monkeys, not my problem. They can deal with it. And when they're ready, they can come back. I would just say, please, reconsider this strategy. And as much as it might upset you to be able to just keep leaning in, you might just watch all of a sudden a break in the reaction. All of a sudden, this new face shows up. This softness appears. Ideally, you never want to get it to that threatened state, but when it happens and you lean in and hold them, fight for them, you can bring them down. Let me just talk in closing with those of you who might identify as anxious. I'll be honest with you. No one wants to be labeled an anxious. Even as I'm talking about this morning. Actually, as Vince and I were talking about the series, I said, I don't want to talk about the anxious. Because they're weak, and I don't, and I'm an anxious. If I'm the spectrum, I'm more that way. I don't like to be needy. I don't like to come across like I'm needing these people in my life to help me. I was talking with this woman this week. She says, I hate it. I don't like even It's so much easier to be an avoidant, to be self-sufficient. I'm fine. I'll go away. I'll be all right. But to be an anxious, what they call a wave, is just in our society where independence is so glorified. The thought that you need the people around you to help just seems weak. The fact that we get emotional, we get in these states. But I got to tell you, your ticket out of this relational hell as an anxious is being able to own who you are and what you do. And I'm not saying you excuse it. I'm not saying you don't work on yourself. But I'm saying you are wired in a way that you had no control over at a time when you were helpless. And it's been with you. Now, the more you can just acknowledge, this is kind of, I got to be honest with you. When I started learning attachment style, I was like going, please don't tell me I'm one of them. Please, I don't like, maybe you've done personality tests and you're going, I don't want to be labeled that personality. Give me that one. The sooner you can just acknowledge your type and start working on it, the better. Acknowledge your natural wiring. The more you can figure that out, the more you have the ability to help those around you understand what's going on. And learn to express your authentic needs. This is really key. Being able to say, I really need you to be able to pick up the phone. Or, if I'm in a state, to be able to just talk, even if for a second. Or, you know what, you're going away tonight. Can you call me as soon as you get to the hotel and just let me know all is okay? It's okay to do that. It's okay to express your needs to someone and ask them to do something for you. There's no shame in that. Sometimes we tend to try to say, I'm gonna power up, I'm gonna cowboy up, and I'm gonna try to do it without doing any of this. It's okay to ask. What is it you need to hear from your partner? When they say something that really feels good to you, that settles you, it's okay to say, I love it when you tell me that. I appreciate that. That landed for me. Thank you. And all of a sudden they start building their cheat sheet. They go, oh, really? Okay, sure. I can do that. When you hold my hand in these environments, that means a lot. When you don't leave my side when we go in these groups of people, that just calms me. Okay. Well, then you're right by me tonight. I really appreciate those texts when you send them to me and knowing that I'm on your mind. You done? Help the people in your life figure you out and keep your window of tolerance wide. You can do that. The last thing I'm going to talk about here is this act of learning to self-soothe. And this is an art form, but we can learn it. Us anxious types, even though we don't do it easily, and for the avoidants out there who just do it so intuitively, so naturally, we can learn it. Breathing. First week, Vince talked about regulation. If you weren't paying attention, that especially is for all the anxious. That whole first week was designed to help us learn what we need to do to be able to at least do our part in regulating our system when all of a sudden we start wigging out. Breathing was a big part of it. He talked about that double breath thing Huberman talks about. All of a sudden it starts refiring or rewiring circuits inside our system. All of a sudden the nervous system starts relaxing. Trauma experts talk about just the art of hugging ourselves. They say it can calm our nervous system. I never knew that. You start learning little hacks when you're in the middle of making up stories, wigging out, waiting for them to respond to your text, waiting them, trying to figure out what to do next, to figure this. It might be to just call someone you can really trust and say, do you have a moment? I'm just having a freak out here, and I just need someone to chat with before I say anything stupid to that person. It's okay. That's another way. The last part of this self-regulating piece that I'll say, and this seems to come up again and again in all the different, oh, by the way, attached. This is Amir Levine, Rachel Heller, fantastic book. Much of what we've been talking about been here. Stan Tatkin, Wired for Love. 2 seminal works on this whole area of attachment. Amazing. One thing that they talk about that the anxious could do for themselves, almost more than anything, is that when your window of tolerance gets tight, and all of a sudden something happens and you feel triggered, they say, if you could just wait, don't react, don't send off another text, don't call. You sent off one call or one phone call, left a message, now leave it. They say the story making that we'll do in that time is rarely right. So the story you become so convinced about, chances are it is way off the mark. If you can just stop, sit in the discomfort, in the dysregulation, and not act further on it. They said, for the anxious attachers, we have such a hyper-vigilant threat system that if we could wait, it would become such an ally for us. You can walk into a room and not even be associated with the person, and you can pick up dysregulation in them, which is such a powerful weapon to be able to go over and just calm a person. And they're going, how did you know? It's okay. If we could use this hyper-vigilant threat system to be able to help those around us, that's the flip side of it. The problem is it wants us to react right now, and it starts firing and making up all these stories. If we could just stop, wait, and then as the dust settles, the real story emerges, especially with those that we know. All of a sudden you go, oh man, I'm so glad I didn't say more. That was completely not what I was expecting. Our hope and prayer is that those of us who are anxious will learn to lean more and more into the middle. So on one end, we've got the avoidant. On the other end, we've got the anxious. And then in the middle, we've got what they call the secure. These are the people that live with big, wide open windows of tolerance. And the way that they react and move in relationships is truly amazing. The way that these people can help the insecure on either ends of the spectrum is fascinating. In fact, next week, Vince and I are going to come, and we're going to role model, we're going to play out some case studies of what it looks like to respond to various kinds of different relational situations we end up in from a secure, attached perspective. Show what it looks like when the people in our lives actually give us the thing that we need the most, whether we're avoidant or anxious. I want to close. I'm going to invite the band up. We're going to close with a song. It's tricky getting into a relationship series like this, knowing that there are some that are in the middle of relational prison, difficulties. They feel like they're in a ditch. They're listening, and it's just painful. Because you're going, oh, I've done that. Oh, I've done that. Oh, I'm doing that. You just need to know that there is possibilities. This whole conversation can birth a whole new chapter, a way of relating in your lives. That's the beautiful thing. We may have developed a certain pattern of relating from the time we were young, the beautiful thing about it is that we can change, we can morph, and we can grow into more and more secure people. So as we close today, may you recognize, no matter where you're at right now in the journey, there is incredibly sunny days ahead. Yeah. Awesome. Glad you're here this morning.